Hi, and welcome to another virtual program of Drop-In Drawing, where we bring the museum to you with a series of drawing and art-making exercises meant to challenge and grow your creative skills. My name is Darcy, and I'm the manager for family and teen programs at the Met, but I'm also an artist and a maker on my free time. Today is Book Lovers Day, so we're going to focus on decorative lettering inspired by an engraver from the 1600s. This work by Kilian was created using a process called engraving, which is an intaglio printmaking process. The printmaker would take a piece of metal like copper or zinc and use tools to draw directly onto the metal. Then ink is applied to the plate so that the ink catches in the lines of the plate. The printmaker would then clean off the excess ink before paper is pressed against the plate to transfer the ink. You can find more information on the engraving process on our website or click the link below in our captions. For our work of art, we're going to focus on the uppercase B from Kilian's ornamental alphabet series. This work is just one page of a book that is about ½ an inch thick, and the width and height of the pages are about 7 inches by almost 9 inches. Kilian only used one color ink for this work, which looks black on a cream-colored paper. There is a box that frames this piece with the letter B taking up a large amount of space within the frame. For our works, we're only going to focus primarily on the letter B and any of the decorative pieces that are decorating the B. This letter B is actually a serif font. Serif refers to the extra line or lines added to the end of a letter or a symbol. In this case, the extra line looks like a swirl on the bottom and on the top vertical left side of the B. Focusing on that left side of the vertical part of the B, it is drawn with a straight, thick, or rectangular shape. This part of the B looks a little like a fancy column that you might see in a building. And the top and the bottom of the vertical shape has extra curves and drop shadows as well. Towards the top half of this rectangular shape is the head and torso of a figure. The bottom half of the body has leg-like shapes that cross and then are attached to a set of eyes on a face. That suggested face has a long mustache-like shape from its nose that curves out from on the bottom part of the vertical shape, both to the left and the right-hand side of this vertical column. On the top right curve of this letter B, there are more decorative curved lines creating more organic or leaf-like shapes. Additionally, on the top right of the curve, the lines look almost like the profile of a stylized eye, nose, and a mouth, with those curved lines meeting at this profile base. On the bottom right curve of the B, there is again the head and torso of a figure with more organic swirls coming from that figure that are decorating the horizontal lines of the middle of the piece of the B and the bottom horizontal line as well. Although we're only going to focus primarily on the letter B and the decorative elements on it, throughout the background of this work of art, you can see lighter swirls and leaf, flower, or fruit designs. For example, vertically on the left side of the B, there are plants hanging from the swirl of the top of that serif. The plants have some simplified leaf shapes as well as fruit hanging from a light line. Additionally, within the negative space of the B, there are 2 full body forms as well as another head and torso of a figure within the middle of the lower curve of the letter B. What I really love most about this work of art is that, given my background in graphic design, I really love sketching decorative letters. This piece in particular has a lot of details embedded throughout the letter B that make it really fun to draw, but I especially love drawing serif fonts. Usually I like to look at works of art like this and use it as inspiration to create my own unique letters. With that being said, We're gonna grab our materials and make some art. Okay, to get started, you wanna get all your materials together. So you wanna start with a sheet of paper. This is just a sheet of printer paper that I have at home. You could use anything that you have at home as well. I have different options for drawing. So today I have two different kinds of mechanical pencils. Mechanical pencils are the kinds where you click a little button on the pencil and the lead comes out the other end to make it so that you can use it and draw with it. Mechanical pencils are great for this kind of drawing because the width of the lead is the same, and you know that it'll just always be this this sharp point. If you don't have a mechanical pencil at home, that's fine. You can also use other pencils. I have this is just a colored pencil. I have your traditional yellow pencil, and then a sketch pencil. You just want to make sure that if you're using a more traditional pencil that you have your pencil sharpener on hand to sharpen the pencil. The point is really important when you're doing a more technical drawing for decorative lettering. Your other option, if you want to have a more finished looking decorative letter, is to have a pen or marker on hand, so that after you've done the majority of your sketching, you can go back in and just use your pen to really define the lines. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep my drawing more like a sketch for today. And then finally, you want to have a ruler or a straight edge on hand. I'm actually going to start this drawing by creating a grid. So if you don't have a ruler on hand, that might be a little bit more difficult. You could guesstimate what kinds of measurements you want on your page if you don't have a ruler. I like to, and we'll go over guidelines, the grid lines in a second, but there are lots of options for a straight edge. You can use an envelope, you can use another piece of paper, you can use a book. Feel free to use whatever you have in your house. If you are going to just go for it and draw from what you see and not be more technical in terms of some grid lines, you can skip ahead. Otherwise, let me talk a little bit about the benefits of some grid lines. I like to grid my page when I'm doing a more technical drawing like a decorative letter because I like it for balance. I also like to make sure that some of my straight lines, even though you may see me during the demo, I'll just sketch it with my hand. I won't even use the ruler to draw it with. I like to know that I have a straight line on my page already and that it's just following the line that's there. For this piece, as I noted earlier, and I'm going to use my green mechanical pencil right now, there is a border frame, and so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create little lines on the bottom edges of this, or on all the edges of this piece of paper, so that then I can draw the straight lines going both horizontal and vertically. And I'm just going to sort of guesstimate where I want the B to be on my page based on my grid lines. So it might be helpful when you're starting to make sure you're marking the middle lines of the page. And so for the bottom shorter edge of the piece of paper, you have an 8.5 by an 8.5 inch paper. That's about 4 1/4. I'm also going to mark off an inch on either side, so on the long side, because that's the width of the frame that I want, so 1 inch in on both sides. If you look at the B, even within that frame, it's not touching the edges of the frame. So on the right hand side where the B is curving, I'm going to give myself an extra 1 inch grid line just so that I know I don't want it touching the frame. So anywhere where that line will be, and I'll show the grid in a sec, the full grid in a second, I'll know that that grid line is helpful for when I'm starting to curve the B. And then on the left hand side, again, the vertical part of the B does not touch the edge of the frame. And the serif part, which is the curvy part on the top and the bottom, also doesn't quite, one of them touches it a little bit, but I'm going to give myself some room by giving myself 2/4 inch ticks from the 1 inch. And we'll use these lines when we're drawing, and I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to flip to the long side of the page and add some grid lines here too, or some markers for some grid lines. For an 11-inch piece of paper, our middle is 5.5. Again, I'm going to give myself 1 inch on either side. And then because the top and the bottom of the bee don't touch the frame, I'm going to give myself 1/2 inch. It may not be enough, but for this drawing, I'm just going to do 1/2 inch. I already gridded a piece of paper for myself, mostly because it's helpful. It takes me a while to actually connect all the lines, but as you can see when I was connecting my grid lines, I didn't go all the way to the edge with the lines. I just kept it within the frame of the piece. And we're looking at the grid for this piece in particular. This is an easy way to break down the letter B. If you're looking at the 2 rectangles here, those will guide you when you're creating your B. So just keep that in mind as we sketch. I'm going to switch over to my more traditional black or gray mechanical pencil and start on the left-hand side of the B, which has a straight vertical line, and I'm just going to follow the grid line that I created, the 3rd one from the left edge. So there's my first line, and then I could have added another grid line for the inside part of the vertical part of the B, but I'm actually just going to sketch it out. I'm going to guess that it's about this thick. If I want it thicker, I can make it thicker. So it's up to you how you also are thinking about your B. Again, the serif part of the B is the straight curve that you see on the bottom, on the top and the bottom of this B. So it comes a little out from this vertical line and it curves over. And because this is the frame, it's not going to touch that frame on both sides. Okay, so when we're ready to draw the 2 curves of the uppercase B, what you want to do is you want to follow the 2nd line from the top of the grid that you created. Follow along. And then curve it. Curve it so that it cuts the corner. There's a little curve. So if this is the corner, you have a little curve. And for now, I'm going to have the curve of the B touch the 2nd line from the right-hand side of the grid that I made, and then curve into the middle line that I created here. If you look at Kilian's original piece, it looks, I don't know because I didn't measure it exactly, but it looks like the middle horizontal line of the B is actually a little bit higher than the middle of the page, but I'm going to make my 2 curves meet on this middle line just because I drew it in and it's easy to follow that horizontal line that way. The bottom curve of this B, I'm going to curve in this similar way as the top. So again, you want to follow the middle horizontal line. And then the B in Kilian's original piece, it comes out more than the top B. So if the top B curves on this line, it seems like the bottom one curves a little bit more out. So I'm just going to curve it and then have it touch this guideline that we created, which is the 2nd guideline from the bottom, the horizontal line from the bottom. So that's the basics of the B. Now, what you may notice is that on the curved part of the B, if you're looking at the original piece, the curved part is thicker than the horizontal lines on the B. They almost match the thickness of the vertical part of the B on the left-hand side. So sometimes what I do, you could do this a few ways, but you can just draw a straight line to achieve that thickness, and then you're just gonna curve it, since we're just sketching, curve it back, curve it so that it curves back onto itself on the horizontal lines. And you want to do this, or you can, sometimes I'll just freehand curve it, create a line that curves. This is very sketchy. Now, your horizontal lines on the B also have a little bit of a thickness to them. It's just not as thick as the curves or the vertical lines. So I'm just gonna add the lines to the top, bottom, and I'm gonna make a thicker middle just so I know where it is. Okay, so there's the basics of my B. Now, I want to add decorations to my B, right? There are lots of elements of this B that make it interesting and exciting to look at. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of technique for that. If you want to mimic some of the figurative pieces that are on this B and throughout this piece, I would highly suggest you checking out a video we did a few weeks ago around drawing a figure. So there seems to be two figures that are actually on the B, and one is on the left-hand side, and that's where we're going to start. So I'm just going to suggest this figure without drawing it in full detail. And to me, it seems like the bottom belly of that figure sort of hits this middle line, so it curves around. And if you look at the original B that Kilian made, the fullness of the body comes out from the straight line that's created. And that's sort of the exciting part about decorative lettering, is that there's the basics of the letter, and then there's the decorative parts that go on top that don't always fit within the lines of the letter. So this is a suggested figure right here. This is the upper torso, and then there's a head, and there's the neck. The reason I start there is because it is such an overwhelming figure on this left side, and it sort of grounds this vertical line. So I see other decorative elements above and below this figure piece, including some, like, an interesting piece that actually comes off of the lines that we've created for the B. It looks like it's a little rectangle. This is why it looks like a column, like a building column to me. And then there's this wavy piece on top that floats back down into the piece. And these triangular pieces kind of flow out from that. And so you're starting to lay it out. There seems to be some sort of scroll on top of the head. Great. Below the figure are more of these curved features. They look kind of like legs, but I don't know, they're kind of like a figure 8 almost. So I'm just gonna sketch them in. And in the way that I'm looking at this, some part of this leg-like thing fits within the letter B we originally sketched out, and some of it comes out a little bit, so you can decide what looks best to you. Do you want to keep it within the straight lines you've drawn, or do you want to have it flow out a little bit? Up to you. Under these leg-like features, I see a face, so I see some eyes, a nose, and this is just suggestive. I'm just suggesting these shapes here. And then this part looks like a really long handlebar mustache to me, but might look different to you. From the nose, there are these curved pieces, and on the left-hand side, the curved piece actually connects to the line that creates this arrow, and on the right, it just flows into the base of the B. And actually it's much longer than what I've drawn here. And so, you know, I may rework that, but for now I'm gonna leave it like that. And this shape is just repeated, it seems a few times in here. And so I'm just gonna lay this in here and we can define it a little bit better later. So you're just gonna keep working up your bee in that way, right? So you're just gonna keep adding more of these decorative pieces. On the right hand side of the curve, there are two really interesting pieces. One on this top right corner, I think of it as the profile of a face. So it seems like there's an eye, a bumpy nose. I love this nose. And a really interesting mouthpiece that kind of curves back into the bee and then comes out of it. And these curves are connected to other curves that go up, right? And I didn't draw the middle line, the middle baseline for this piece of paper, but I see like a curve coming from this face that curves up on the horizontal line of the bee. And there's some really fun, you know, decorative details here. I see multiple curves, so I'm just gonna suggest them for now. And then shooting off of this face on the left side of the curve, there are more decorative pieces that kind of flow out. But what we're doing is we're just sort of building these decorative pieces along this piece so that it still has the suggestion of the curve of the bee. It still looks like a bee, even if you're adding more details and more decorative pieces to it. Again, for this bottom figure, you can check out the video from a couple weeks ago on how to draw a figure. But for this, the nice thing that you can tell is that this figure kind of keeps the shape of the curve on, and it just looks like it's a part of it, but it's still outside of the original bee that we drew. So this is the torso and the stomach part of this figure. And just like the top where these lines are, there are some interesting swirls that go back into the middle horizontal line. There's some curves. There seems to be some animal here. And then there's some curves that flow off of this figure. Again, similar to the ones we did on the top and middle horizontal lines of the bee. That create a more decorative shape. Now, I actually sketched this in green and then started to lay some darker lines on top so that you can see sort of how you can continue to go back in and define the lines. The nice thing is you can use these other pencils that you may have, or you can use this pencil in general to draw, but there's some really dark pieces to this bee that make it defined. So it looks like a shadow is on the top left side that's really dark. That shape sort of, that darkness is mimicked in this like V part, the upside down V or triangle we have here. So you just want to keep going in and drawing these elements and defining them as you're drawing them. And you can also erase, these aren't the best erased. My erasers are not the best, but you can erase away these lines as well as you continue to define them so that you get more of the decorative pieces. You don't want to forget your serif. It has this nice curve to it. There's a little bit of a shadow. So you're just going to want to keep going in and drawing it. The interesting thing about this this vertical piece, when you lay out the figure here, is that again, some of it fits within this frame we've created. And if you look at the original piece, where the head is, it's circular and it fits within the vertical. And then there's a little bit of black. But then when you get to the torso and the stomach, to me it looks like it comes a little bit out. And so you just want to keep like the legs, the same thing happens. The legs kind of curve like a figure 8, and some of it fits within the framing that you have here, and you can make it dark around the legs. And then I like to switch between pencils. You can use the mechanical pencil to add some of the details in. There's some nice curved lines on the legs, so I'm putting a lot, but that's not how he has it in the drawing or the etching. So you just want to keep going in and adding more details. I did another version of this, again, where the green sort of laid out where everything on the B, like the B shape, and then with my mechanical pencil, I went in and was playing with the curves, playing with the shapes of the faces, the figure. I didn't fully sketch out, but it still looks like a bee. If you were to look at this, you say, oh, that is a bee, but it has nice curves, swirls, faces, figures. You could add lots of interesting shapes, designs, things like that to create a really fun decorative letter. When you're done, make sure that you post a picture of your sketch online, and if you hashtag #sketch, we'll be able to repost your works of art. Otherwise, we will see you in 2 weeks when we will have a new inspiration object for you and a new drawing prompt. Thank you.